Job Seeker Nation, what's up? What's happening, y'all? Thank you very much for joining us here on Job Seeker Nation. This is the program we stream live to YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. I hope you'll get the most out of this session. We have a panel discussion as usual, and we have some guests. I'll introduce them in a second. I want to be sure to get my co-host, Jack Kelly. He is the founder of WeCruiter.io, also a compliance recruiter and senior contributor to careers in Forbes.com. How are you, Jack?
Good, good. So I was trying a new system here.
Uh-oh.
Are you guys hearing it echo?
No echo. It's perfect. I'm going to come back to you in a second here, but let me introduce our guest here. Brad Minton is a certified resume writer, career coach, and a co-host of Your Career GPS podcast. Welcome, Brad. How are you?
Hi, Mark. Doing absolutely fantastic today. Thank you guys so much for having me. Thank you, Jack. We appreciate this opportunity with you.
Our pleasure.
Great.
Thanks.
Yes, and his co-conspirator is Cassie Spencer. She's assistant director of interns and career education. What college is that, Cassie?
I'm at Binghamton University in upstate New York.
Okay, all right. A native New Yorker, another one. Yes, we love it. And she's also a co-conspirator, if you will, of Your Career GPS podcast. And I wanted to get back to second to you, Jack, because you've got a new thing on your site. Or is it a separate site? Because when I went, it went to like the same URL, but like a sub URL. It's called leveterpitch.com, and I know it's to help job seekers, right?
So let me do this. Are you hearing feedback or?
No feedback. You just came in a little choppy, hot second, but you should be fine.
Okay. So tell me if it comes in, because I hear the kind of coming back in my headphones. So what I'm doing is with elevatorpitch.com is this. I've noticed that so many people have a challenge answering interview questions when they say, tell me about yourself, or giving the elevator pitch. So I thought if we could have kind of video option where someone can go on there to answer some prompts. So tell me about yourself. Why do you want this job? Can you tell me what you did at your last job and things of that nature? If you practice it, you'll get really good at interviewing. And I think what I've seen over the years as a recruiter, most people, even if they're great at what they do, they don't really know how to sell themselves so well. So that it's like anything else. Like if you just keep practicing something, you're going to get better at it. So it gives you the platform where you can kind of say, hey, I'm Jack Kelly. Here's what I do. Here's what I'm looking to do next. Here's why I would be awesome to work for your company. And so it's kind of just an easy, simple tool. It's one of those things that's like, like where you're not reinventing the wheel, but it's something that can really help people.
Okay, Jack, you're coming in and out. Your volume, it minimizes, and then it gets louder, and then it minimizes again. I'm sure we'll work that out during the broadcast here, but I just want to address everyone. So you guys check out, if you put in elevator pitch, it's actually spelt without the E. So it's like, looks like levator.com. It will go to Jack's place. And you'll be able to start practicing your pitches and start practicing how you'll meet people. It's perfect for when people get back into conferences and get back to person where they can use an elevator pitch effectively, or they can use it virtually as well. But it's going to help you get better at introducing yourself, and that first few seconds really does make all the difference in someone's the way they present themselves. So let's get into our program. I just want to remind the audience, say hi to us at any time. Let us know where you're from. Let us also in on what you're working on. What are you wrestling with in your job search? We're going to try to address everything. So we specifically talk about young professionals making bold career moves today. I was a young professional several decades ago, and I will tell you, it could be a little tough because you're told a lot of information, and a lot of times that's old and antiquated. And hopefully, we'll be able to get you up to speed. And for one, I think people should stop listening to the parents, like myself, who I'll give my kids the right information, but a lot of parents don't really give the right information. They don't. They're pretty much stuck on how they used to job search in 1989, which doesn't work for the which doesn't work for the rest of us. So there's a lot going on in the news, and I want to be sure that we capture it. So the first thing was talking about Jack's new place, and definitely you want to visit his site. You want to get in his Facebook group, We Meet Up. Just connect with him about it. And probably is well over 1,000 right now, or somewhere along the line. And hopefully that we are going to present you with the best information possible. Now, I was listening to Dr. Dawn's program this past weekend, and she had a guest on there that talked about Amazon's return ship program, which is apparently for employees that have been off for a year, whether they were due to pregnancy or taking care of a loved one or taking care of themselves sick. And I was just wondering, and I've heard other companies kind of doing the same. So it's kind of like, companies are starting to reach out as a way to, recruit, I guess. Should all companies offer similar programs, or would this be something that's mutual beneficial? Cassie, have you heard of such program, or are you hearing things about programs like these? And maybe you'd like to offer a perspective on it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've definitely heard of companies having programs like this and other types of programs that allow people to take time off for whatever reason, whether that be to take care of a family member or to grow their family or for, a variety of other reasons, and then to, return back to their job or return back in a different way. I think we're seeing, and I know in past episodes, and you've talked to other panelists, like we're seeing a lot of companies really look at the flexibility that they're offering their employees and how they are creating a variety of programs to really be appealing to job seekers and to help them kind of maintain that work-life balance, or I know some people call it like work-life integration, and really creating company cultures and programs and all of that type of stuff that allow people to have flexibility and to adjust, with the needs of their life outside of work. So, I mean, I don't run a company, but I think it's great if, if companies, and especially these bigger companies that we're seeing do some of this stuff, are offering that to employees. And I think it'll be really interesting to see how, as our world continues to kind of change and flexibility looks different for a lot of people, I think it'll be interesting to see how companies manage that with some of these different benefits and programs and things like that.
Yeah, I don't ever remember in my work life, and I used to work with doctors and lawyers for a long time, where that there's a program within a company that is sort of kind of like reaching out and let us help you up off your knees, so to speak. Brad, have you heard anything from your clients or people you've been reaching out to, or people who reach out to you about a program similar to this one?
Not necessarily. However, I can certainly mimic a lot of the things that Cassie's talking about. These things seem to be coming up a little bit more and a little bit more here in the more recent. And so she had mentioned a couple of words in there that I think are really important. I think flexibility is obviously the first one, but I've heard a lot more lately about how these certain types of opportunities really appeal for individuals who have been displaced and who have, been unemployed for a period of time, to be able to generate traction and to show some momentum and to demonstrate that, I'm still working. I'm developing skills, I'm showcasing a talent, and that I'm not staying stagnant. And so like a program like this, which is, I believe it's about 16 weeks, if I'm not mistaken, really allows them the capability to almost do a trial run. And that's sort of what I've been hearing a little bit more of, companies almost allowing sort of these opportunities to sort of field test their talent and see how are they going to acclimate into their culture, how are they going to demonstrate their skills, how are they going to showcase their value, and allow them a range of different opportunities to do that. And that's what I kind of understand this program is giving them the opportunity to do, is not, apply their skills in different situations.
Yeah, this might be part of the great rehiring that we are hearing, so to speak, as so people resign. Of course, they may be able to go back to some of their old companies and be able to work for them if that's a good idea. They left on good terms. I'm sure not everybody's going to be able to do that. Jack, have you heard about it? Have you been listening to the streets lately
Yeah.
about returnship programs?
I haven't heard about. Oh my goodness, I'm doing it again.
Well, we can hear you. We can
What?
see you.
All right, so you hear me okay? 'Cause I hear it back here. So you got to
Yeah.
love. I start, I build like a tech site, and I can't even get this right. You got to give me credit for that first step, and I can do that, right? That doesn't hold me back.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll give you a chance because you're coming in and out now.
Yeah.
We're hearing every two words.
I'll tell you what. You guys talk. I'm gonna get my tech guy.
We'll work it out here. You work it out over there. Yeah. But I read a lot of Jack's articles. But if you know Jack and if you've looked him up, good Lord, he puts out like 4 or 5 a week. I don't know. He has his staff and does all that kind of stuff. But I think I'll come back to you, Brad, in the sense that job seekers. Is it really a beneficial thing for job seekers to try to apply to companies that would have a returnship program for their informal employees? Or really, I don't know if it wasn't even crystal clear whether it's going to be that person's own employees or that they would reach out to whoever is who applies and made the cut, that if they've been off a year, that they're going to get a little extra hand to help pull them up. Is that your understanding?
Yes, I'm hearing a little bit of audio interference in there as well.
Oh, from my side?
I was just hearing something in there. I didn't catch the tail end of that. Can you say it again?
Okay. Yes, the tail end. Yes, we're having fun here. Yes, the tail end is. I was just wondering, would that be beneficial for job seekers, knowing that maybe they're working with a company that's going to be able to reach out and help them if they need that kind of help. Let's say they come off of pregnancy leaves or helping a family member. It wasn't really even specifically clear if it's going to be just former employees or if it's going to even be new employees who also need that little help coming up, come up into the company and get adjusted.
Absolutely. I mean, these are exactly what I think individuals who are in that kind of circumstance really need as an opportunity to really kind of rethink and sort of reimagine what they would like to be able to do. Because, I mean, if we're just talking about the pandemic, maybe people have been out of work for a year and a half. If we've been, maybe talking about, mothers who are taking care of children, maybe a considerable time longer, and maybe their values have shifted, and maybe it's not a matter of, okay, I want to do the exact same thing that I went to school with, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and I need an opportunity to really sort of field test things and have an opportunity to develop myself and really rethink and reimagine what I'd like to do with my future. And so I love this concept. I think it's a fantastic opportunity.
Yeah. Now, Cassie, how about you? Are students talking about it, or is that something that's going around and people are looking forward to? Or you really haven't heard specifically about it, but you've read about it maybe as a great idea?
Yeah, I haven't heard too much from students really kind of focused on like return to work or returnship programs of this type of nature. I think it's something that, potentially as these programs become more common, students will start thinking about it and, asking more questions about companies that do this and why it might be beneficial to look into them, as they job search and that type of thing. I think one of the benefits of these programs and kind of the question that you asked Brad earlier is that, for job seekers, knowing maybe they haven't had to take time off yet, or that hasn't been a situation they've experienced, but knowing that that's a benefit going into things, I think is potentially appealing to a job seeker, down the road, that they're picking a company because it has this added benefit that, life happens. We've certainly seen that, and there's a lot of unpredictable things, pandemic aside. So knowing that a company would have this type of resource, I think, especially as they potentially grow and become more popular, could be very appealing to students. But outside of that, I haven't heard students talk about it too much. Quite honestly, I think students, they've graduated. It's summer for them. They are taking a break, a well-deserved break, especially students who will be returning in the fall. And so I haven't heard too much chatter from students about this in particular.
Well, Jack, it looks like we can hear you again.
All right. So yeah.
Yes.
You know what? It's interesting. What happened? I think it somehow hit on twice. So that was happening.
Yeah. Well, that's fine. Yeah. In fact, you did have two windows, and I thought maybe.
Oh, that's what. Okay. So that's what it was.
I thought it was a bailout plan of some sort. That maybe if one stopped working, you could just turn to the other.
So it's good. Okay. We're good.
Yes. So Jack, from your point of view, this is a good idea, right? We're seeing to where companies actually kind of laying a landing pad, so to speak, for somebody that's been off of work for a while.
Yeah, you know what is? I think in this whole war for talent, companies have to figure out creative ways to get people aboard. And, I think the better companies and the ones who be more competitive are the good ones who come up with really super cool ideas, what to do and how to bring people in, how to attract them, how to retain them. And, the ones who don't are going to be left behind. And it's so interesting because you could tell, like today, I'm writing a little bit about with Morgan Stanley telling people not only do they have to come back to work, and I'm not faulting them, to come back to work, but they also have to show that they're getting vaccinated, which on one hand you could say is fair, but the other hand, other companies are maybe not as strong in terms of pushing it. And I think you see this divide where some companies are like, hey, we're still going to be in this pre-pandemic mindset. Let's just turn back the clock to where we were in 2019, 2018. And we're just going to forget that this whole year happened. Like, just forget about it. Let's just go back to where it was. Everybody back in the office, get in before 9 o'clock, stay till 10 o'clock at night, work weekends, whatever. And then there are other companies that say, wait, no. Our workers are saying we want different. We want remote work. We want flexible schedules. We want maybe a 4-day work week. Maybe we want a 5-hour work day. And I think that's what's going to happen. You're going to have these companies that are going to say, hey, this is what you want. We're going to do it because we want to get the best and brightest, and we want to have the most motivated people. So whether it's a returnship or any other thing, I think I applaud it because the more companies try things, it doesn't mean everything's going to work. Some things may not work, some things will work, but at least if they try, then you can see, oh, okay, this works, or it didn't work this way, but we'll try something else. And whenever they do it, I think you gotta say thank you. It's good because it shows that they're thinking outside the box.
Yes, it is, and it's kind of refreshing in the sense that, and it was a little surprising to hear that, hey, we're going to set this landing pad for those who are, for them to, I think, one, there's going to be the great fight for talent that will probably come up here in a little bit, and I think some people are kind of preparing for that as we've seen the great resignation, as we talked about last week, and the big shift and the great reshuffling. I think we're ready for the great. I think some people are waiting for the big payback. It was a song back in the '70s by James Brown called "The Big Payback." So I think maybe we might see, Cassie, a little bit of the big pushback as far as say, hey, we really want to work. We really want to work remote, or we want to work how we want to work. I think is ultimately we want the flexibility because some people want to do both. They want to have that hybrid, and they want to come back into the office. Cassie, and we're going to get to you and Brad, especially as far as young people, because we want to hear what the young people. You're listening to old
Yeah,
guys.
I want to hear a lot
we
about
bring
that,
in there.
Mark. I'm
But
invested interest in
definitely,
this.
but definitely, I'd like to hear from your perspective, not just college students, but those
No,
who
college
may be
grads. That's what
landing,
we want to hear about.
and young professionals. How are they feeling about having a choice, or do they feel like they really have a choice, or maybe this is just all talk?
I think it's a mix, right? A lot of companies are saying a lot of things, and kind of like we're hearing it, how much of it is actually going to work, right? So there's companies that are just like throwing things kind of at the wall and saying, let's try. And I think that's appealing to some students. And then there's other companies and industries that we're seeing, like we're going back. Everything back to normal, and we're not continuing to be flexible and to adjust. And I know a lot of the students that I've worked with and that are kind of entering the job market right now, I think they're also mixed. For some of them, it's been almost 2 years of 100% remote learning and not being on the college campus that they were on for 2 years or for however long, and potentially really craving that like in office, back to normal type of work. And I think, especially starting your first job virtually and doing that, some students and recent grads are going to thrive and they're going to love it. And I think some are really going to miss that kind of like sense of camaraderie of like all the new grads who have orientation together at the big company, and, and the outings and the lunches and that type of thing. So I kind of see, just as like companies are splitting, some going back, some getting really kind of trendy and creative, that we're going to see new grads, young professionals, seasoned professionals kind of have that split too. And that, a lot of conversations I've had with students, it's about like, what is important to you? Because if being in the office and that type of environment is important to you, then we're looking at specific types of companies. And if the opposite is important, and that flexibility and that freedom to have a 4-day work week or a 5-hour work day or a hybrid model, whatever it may be, then we're looking at, completely other different companies. So I think we're going to kind of see that big split with both companies and job seekers and kind of what they're looking for. So it's always been important to know like what you want and what you value and what's important to you. But I think it's probably even more important now.
Yeah, Brad, you probably agree with that, as I do. But go ahead.
Yes. It's really, really interesting. It's really fascinating. Just in terms of my experience in working with students, it definitely seems like there is a much more of a favoritism towards the remote model. I think it's just people have kind of settled into that new normal. And however, I do think, though, that there's still some resistance to that. And surprisingly, by the Gen Z, by the college graduates that are coming out now, that you would kind of think would be sort of embracing that technology and so forth, there is still some sort of like apprehension to fully commit to that remote thing, because for a lot of them, maybe that have just started out their careers, or as Cassie was kind of saying, had this image in their head about what post-graduation would look like. It was more of like, they kind of envisioned, the office and camaraderie and, going on outings together. And, for them, they really do tie their social network in with work. And so it is about developing those relationships, because many of them are not married. They don't have kids yet. And so being able to interact with those folks, particularly for the extroverts, and I talk about introvert, extrovert a lot. You know, the introverts were celebrating, woohoo! You know, so we were, you know, we're batting down the hatches and we're okay. But for those that really crave that interaction, for them, it's, you know, they would love that hybrid model. So I agree with Cassie. It's very, very mixed.
Yeah, I see it being mixed, and I can understand why. When you're young, it's about the social life, right? I mean, yeah, you got the work, and yeah, you plan to go to work, and you understand those are the rules of engagement. But at the same time, for the first time in anybody's generation, they're looking at possibly a choice of where to work and maybe how they want to work. And you know, in past generations didn't have that, and that's becoming pretty interesting to see. You agree, Jack? You have a other perspective on it?
See, I think, in my opinion, if you're a young person, I would advise you to go into the office. Even if you have a remote option, even if you have a hybrid, I would say go in. And here's the reason why. You're going to have only a certain percentage in the office because it could be still kind of limited capacity. With a hybrid system, you have 2-3 days in. So the office won't be empty, but it won't be full. So if you're there, you're going to make an impact. They're going to see you. They're going to notice you. You can kind of go out of your way to make yourself noticed. If you're working remotely, there's kind of a concern, not only for a young person starting out, but even for a mid or senior level person, out of sight, out of mind. They don't see you. So you have a really good chance. In fact, I would argue that you not only want to go in, you want to be in the office, you want to be around there, you want to make yourself known in a good way. So that when there are projects to be done, when maybe there's a new client that they want to offer to you, maybe a promotion, because you're just there and they see you working. And is it fair to the people who are remote? No. But that's just how life is at times. So if you're in front of them and you make a good impression, they're going to think, hey, Cassie, Brad, they're great. I see them there. They're working hard. They're doing this. They're doing that. They notice it. And so they're going to get the raises, promotion, bonuses. Is it, again, it's not fair to the other people, but this is the game we're playing. So I would say definitely go in. And also from a social aspect, you know, after a year or so being home, I don't think it's healthy, particularly for young people, to just stay home for like, you know, another year or so. You want to get out there. You want to build up your social network. A lot of people probably lost their social network at any age. Yes. So you want to get out there and just start again. So you go out to lunch with people, you go out for dinner, you go out for some drinks and kind of build that up. So I think that's kind of mission critical. Even if you feel it's more comfortable at home, and maybe as Brad was pointing out, maybe you're an introvert and you like just being at home and you don't want to have to be around people, kind of push yourself out of that comfort zone. Again,
I think that you're right, and I think a lot of people are worrying about how they're going to be seen if they decide to work at home as opposed to the office. There's the perception of that I'm working harder if I'm at the office because of my activities are being seen as opposed to being home. But yet the studies are also showing that if you've been home, you've been 3 to 10 times as productive as you've ever been. So I think there has to be a value match. And
you know what it's playing. It's sometimes productivity is good, but sometimes playing the game is better. You know, so you can be productive, but if you're productive at home and no one's really noticing it, as opposed to you can maybe not be that great, but you're in the office and you're a nice person and you're charming and have a little charisma, then you're a rock star. So
and for the first 90 days, as a new employee and young person, you're constantly checking the temperature of the room. And probably somebody who's just coming out of college for the first time is not doing as deep a research into culture as somebody who's been around the bend a little bit, at least a little, because they're going to care about, okay, what is the culture working from home as opposed to working in the office. Cassie, did you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I would just say I think it really depends on like how companies are handling remote work too, you know, and I think even pre-pandemic, we were seeing some companies that had a really good approach to like building that sense of community virtually. And I continue to be impressed with how like the younger generations and young professionals and college students are creating communities that, although it's different, right, from like your physical community in the space that you live in, of how they're creating communities on different social media platforms and different servers and that type of thing. And, whether it's through, I was just reading about a company that has like a gratitude and praises thread in their like company Slack. And one of the employees was saying how it's like one of her favorite things to read and people are always adding to it. And it's different than it may be in a company, but I know I've worked at colleges where like no one knows what you're doing and you're just a number, you're an employee, you're a number. No one knows who you are. And in this example, that thread is something that everyone has access to, from, CEO all the way down the line and everyone in between, so that you can read. And maybe you don't know the face to the name and that type of thing, but I think there are ways to do it and to do it well, and to bring in that social network and, use all these different platforms and technologies that we have to create that sense of community. So I don't know that there's a perfect answer. I think it really depends on the individuals and the company and all of that. But I believe in a mix. I think everyone needs a healthy dose of some time in the office and some time at home, and that ability to maybe pick and choose, like we're saying, of can you spend your first 90 days in the office, and then, from there you decide, you're in 2-3 days a week or something like that. So yeah.
So what are you
Yeah.
what are you finding out for the kids who just graduated? Are they getting jobs? And if so, do you know what options they're going with, like in office, remote, hybrid?
Yeah, I mean, the students I work with, it's quite a big mix of those who have had jobs secured for months now at this point, just depending on their company and industry and all of that stuff. Certainly some who are still job searching, as we would see in any normal year. There's going to be students who graduated in the last month or 6 weeks who are still job searching. But I would say of like the students I work directly with, it is all over the board in terms of 100% remote, 100% in office, hybrid models, in-person training, but then working remotely, that they have options, all that type of stuff. And just, really quite a mix across industry and job and location. I work with a lot of students who have jobs in the city, in New York City. And so, just like we're seeing some companies saying everyone's coming back, some are doing the opposite as well.
Yeah.
I imagine at least it's better this year than last year. Much better, right?
Yes.
Yeah. How about you, Brad? As far as strategy, or maybe have you've seen where students do have a preference, are they doing anything strategically as far as how they're going about, and let's say, are they concerned about culture? Are they concerned about being seen as a good performer, a top performer going in? Or maybe they're finding out on the back end, maybe I need to be a little bit more thoughtful on how that may look, whether I'm in the office or away from the office.
Absolutely. And I think to kind of piggyback a little bit off what Cassie was talking about there, it is a little difficult. It is a little bit tricky because everybody's kind of figuring it out on the fly, and everybody's doing a little bit differently. So even individuals who have, a clearly defined target, depending on, the company that you're trying to look at, depending on the specific role, it's going to vary a little bit in terms of what to expect. And so I think really trying to be thoughtful and intentional about the research that you do, spending time networking and connecting with individuals and getting a pulse for what's currently happening. What are the decisions that are being made, and what can they anticipate in the future, really allows them to kind of target and tailor their messaging accordingly, to be able to mimic exactly what the challenges are that the companies are looking for. So I really think it takes maybe a little bit of extra time, because everyone has to really be mindful of what's going on for that individual role, and not necessarily kind of think, because I'm in a certain industry, or because I'm looking for a different pocket of jobs, it's going to be this way across the board.
Yeah, kind of wonder what's going to take place, in all industries, or will it be industry specific? Now, my experience for the most part, people who work IT got it made because they were kind of like the first ones to work remote and
Mhm.
had the hookup, so to speak,
Mhm.
almost literally and figuratively in that particular sense. Jack, do you think? How about in the compliance industry? You're probably seeing it all over the place, and probably a lot of people are. You have those companies where they're demanding workers come back to work.
Like I say, I would say about 80 to 90% of the people, if not more, want to remain remote. And
Mhm.
it's very rare where I hear somebody tell me, "Oh yeah, I want to go back in, full time, or even 2 or 3 days a week." And that could also be a function of with the people I place. They're generally in places like New York City, San Francisco, LA, Chicago, big hubs. And more often than not, people are making commutes. And once, when you're making the commute, let's say from New Jersey or Long Island to Manhattan, that can easily be round trip 2+ hours depending on traffic.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So after working for a year and change remote, they'll tell me like they say I can't even imagine getting back on a train or bus and going through that again.
Yes.
So I think there's going to be a lot of pushback in terms of when, even if they want people in 2 or 3 days a week, I think maybe if they have to, they'll do it, but doing kicking and screaming. And if they take away the remote, there's going to be a lot of disgruntled people. I mean, number one, they're definitely going to leave and try to go to a company that lets them work remote. So you're going to end up, like as I mentioned earlier, you can have these kind of companies that are the winners and others that won't. So I think the more progressive companies that say, hey, if you want to work remote, sure, because then they know we'll get great talent.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
it's not they want to stay at home because they don't want to do a good job. They want
Mhm.
to stay at home because they realize, hey, I get 2 3 hours back to my life. I have a work-life balance. I'm more motivated. I'm more energized. I don't feel I'm micromanaged. I'm happier about my life. I can spend it with my kids, my family, my friends. I can have some hobbies. If I want to go and do a bicycle ride, during the day and it's a nice day out, great. I'll do that. Then I'll come back and then I'll gladly work a little late because I appreciate this relationship we have. So I think from what they tell me, I'd be shocked if people would go back in droves. The only way they're going to do it if they're scared of losing their job and do it temporarily until they can find something else.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, which kind of is a great bridge to the next segment of show, where I'd really will want to know, particularly from both Brad and Cassie, about, and we'll start with you, Cassie, about, and I've given you a little time to think about it, and maybe you could give us a little insight to, with all that's going on, what are young professionals and graduates struggling with this year, and is the struggle a little bit different from last year to this year? Because I think that people almost, you're going to a restaurant and you have so many choices that are out there, but you only may have access to just a few things. So, how did you counsel in this particular account? That would be a very interesting perspective. What kind of advice? And I'm sure it was all over the place, but are there one or two things that maybe in general that a lot of people were really struggling with their job search and starting out?
Yeah, I think this year, one of the biggest differences I've seen with students who are getting ready to graduate and have just graduated is that there still seems to be this mindset that there's like not a lot of jobs available and that
Mm.
there's not a lot of opportunities out there, and so how are they handling that? And while we're still seeing companies respond in different ways and post jobs in different ways, I think it's been a lot of getting students to think differently about their job searches and about not even necessarily changing their goals of like what job do they want or that type of thing, but getting them to think a little bit differently of can they do that same job but in a different industry or in maybe a smaller company or in a different
Mhm.
way, right? And to kind of just be open to new things and things they haven't thought about. I know I work with a lot of students, like I said, who want to go into New York City, or that was always their thought. It's like the top 5 to 10 companies in New York City. That's their plan. That's all they focus on for a good amount of time throughout their college career. And so that's great, but can we think about it from a different perspective now? And are there other companies? And like I said, I'm in upstate New York, so I'm about 3 hours from the city. And like, there's companies here that are dying to hire people. So it's a matter of like, hey, can you stay here for a year? Are you willing to make that type of adjustment and either pick a different location or pick a smaller company and those types of things? So I've been having a lot of conversations about that and really trying to encourage students to be open to different things, and to just kind of understand that like the job market is still kind of a little funky, but there are jobs available and there are companies who are really eager to get new talent and new grads in and working for them, whether it be in person or remote or hybrid or whatever they're doing. And I think then the other like struggle that I've seen or kind of main point of conversation is just students feeling like, you know, within the last year and a half that they haven't had the opportunity to do internships like they had planned, or if they were supposed to have an on-campus job and then they didn't, right? And kind of struggling with some of that. And so looking for ways to be creative of how are we marketing the skills that you have and what experiences have you had, you know, getting students to think about different online courses and certifications and ways that they can show employers like, hey, I've been doing things in the last year and a half or however long. And just getting kind of creative with that, you know, that it doesn't have to be a paid internship or something for it to be impressive to an employer. But that volunteer work that they did, or the social media account that they're running and have grown, you know, exponentially over the pandemic, can be something that an employer is really interested in, and that shows a lot of skills.
Yeah, and I'm sure they got miffed by all the people who resigned from their jobs in the past couple of months. According to CNBC and some other studies, 4 million left their jobs last month, in May particularly. That's just crazy, and I'm sure that kind of made everybody shake their heads and go, "What in the world is going on?" So, with this kind of market, Brad, how does a college student prepare for a job search where you just don't know what's going to happen from one day to the next?
Right. Clearly, Cassie and I work in the same industry because we're both in higher education. It's kind of like as she's talking, I'm going, yep. I've heard, I've heard
Yeah,
these things. I've heard these stories.
right.
And I think one of the things that was coming to my mind as she was talking was just about that, because everything has been so turbulent for the last year and change. It's very, very easy for students to get into very restrictive, rigid thinking about, well, you know, I have to focus exclusively on stability. Like the values have changed quite a bit, and you know what we've really been, you know, trying to work with our students on, and we've had conversations about before in the past, is really about getting creative and really thinking
Hmm.
that just because you have a degree in finance, or because you have a degree in marketing, or you have a degree in information technology, does not equal one thing. And so I think it's kind of like a little bit of sort of a generational kind of thing too, because a lot of the students that we work with, their parents were displaced during the Great Recession, and so they're getting these messages from parents that, okay, you got to focus on, you know, getting that full-time job, right? You know, sort of that old traditional sort of school of thought. You got to focus on stability, focus on job security, and get that 9 to 5, get that 401k, and all of these types of things. And so what, you know, we're trying to do is kind of say, well, you know, X doesn't always equal Y. It's not always like this equals this. And sometimes you do have to get a little bit creative. And your major, the transferable skills that you develop in the classroom, outside of the classroom, in your personal time. I mean, as she was kind of talking about, just, you know, things that you've done with student organizations and groups, you know, your networking, the service projects that you've done, all these different things, they actually build to your resume, and they may not think about it that way. They think, oh, these are just little side projects or little side hustles that I'm doing, but they're developing skills. And it's kind of like thinking about how can you utilize these in a different way. And so one of the things that I do when I'm having conversations with students is kind of really get them, as I kind of like to call it, focus on your North Star. What kind of challenges do you want to work on? What problems do you want to solve? And how can you leverage the skills that you've developed to this point to meet challenges? And then think about all the different unique ways that you can go about doing that. And they can realize really quickly it's not one thing. It's actually multidimensional. And it's really neat to be able to kind of talk through some of those conversations.
Hey, Brad.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jack.
I've seen this. This might just be anecdotal. For people in, let's say, my neighborhood, kids are graduating. I've seen a trend of, instead of a full-time job, they're kind of interning at companies. Is that kind of what you're referring to? That maybe they can't get that full-time job, so they're saying, hey, you know what? At least I'll get an internship. I don't know if they're paid or not paid, but at least to be doing something.
Yes, well, that's certainly one example. So that's an opportunity, and it's an opportunity to take advantage and utilize and make an impact and build a resume in maybe a way that was a little bit unconventional, or maybe a way that wasn't originally intended, but still allows them to showcase their talents.
But Brett, is this more of a trend, or just like an anecdotal that I see, or is this something that maybe wasn't there a few years ago, but now this has become, companies are doing this more often?
Right. I would absolutely say that, particularly amongst this generation, they're kind of realizing, and I think a lot of it, I could sort of get into like a whole different tangent, but I'll try to stay standard. But I would probably say it is a little bit more of a trend right now, and it's just because it's more of like, how do we kind of think a little bit creatively and not limit ourselves to just one thing? And so when you look at a lot of the students that we work with, they do have these entrepreneurial spirits. They do these side projects and these ventures outside of their work. Or their school, if they're still in school. Cassie looked like she had something she was going to put in here.
Cassie, I'd like to answer the same question. Jack, that's a great question about.
Because Mark, because I haven't seen, I don't, maybe I saw it but didn't notice it, but this year more than any, I've just seen more of those type of jobs out there, more people saying they're interns, which just took me a little bit by surprise.
Well, I'm not surprised. And Cassie, I just want to say this one thing. I was serious when I said at the outset of the show. I don't know if you were in or out at that particular time, but I think that the young professionals and young graduates need to forget about what their parents have said about the Great Recession. Forget it, because those rules don't apply. And obviously there's a different behavior, because when I remember the Great Recession as a career coach, and when I was doing a lot of one-on-one coaching, is that the companies were hoarding these positions, and I think sometimes were making up stuff, because they would actually have all these positions available, but they said, but there's nobody that qualifies for all these millions of positions. I was like, then why did you make this position? So I think that was one of the behaviors that happened then. That's definitely not the case now. It's the opposite. It's like, please come to work. So Cassie, go ahead. You were about to say something as I interrupted.
No, it's great. And I definitely do think I'm seeing more students move into internships as kind of their first opportunity or experience after school. So I do think it's becoming more common, and I think it's a little bit twofold, that it's a win for students, especially those who have left college and potentially are feeling like they don't have enough experience or are not feeling confident in the skills and the experiences that they have to apply to those full-time jobs. But also then companies who are kind of saying, like, this is an opportunity for it to be a trial run for everyone. Do you like this company culture? Are you a good fit for us? Are we a good fit for you, without a big commitment? I think a lot of internship programs, I have some students who are in ones that are like 10 months or 11 months, 12 months, a shorter time frame, but it allows them to kind of rotate through a couple different areas or departments of a company to kind of like, maybe they do have that finance degree, but then they're trying out a couple different areas to really see like, what do I want to do, and gain experience that they didn't have, and to see which like teams they click with the best, and that type of thing. So definitely seeing a lot more of that. And I think students some of them are really eager to like take advantage of an opportunity that is shorter term, especially, things have been wild for a year and a half. And this is like a commitment without it feeling like, oh my God, I have to work for this company for the next 5 years or something. And what is that going to be like? And kind of that older school mentality of like, yeah, you stay in your first job for a minimum of 3 to 5 years. And that's how it has to be. And you can't possibly leave after a year. I think that's scary for a lot of students. That was scary for me. And I have been out of school for a while now to think about like, oh my God, you can't leave a job within a year, but an internship kind of allows you to do that and to then potentially decide, if the company is offering full-time positions from their interns to, they have that out. They can say, yes, I want to stay, or nope, I'm going to go do other things, and give themselves time to job search really strategically and to get a better sense of what their values are and what's important to them, and to see what happens with the world. It's like we're seeing everyone do things differently. And I think even the next year is going to be really interesting with how companies make changes and what sticks and what doesn't.
Cassie and Brad, how about this too? Because I noticed the job descriptions that I've seen across the board have also changed. Like, for instance, with recent grads or fairly recent, you'll see jobs saying entry level. But then when you look closely, they're like, okay, 2-3 years experience. And it almost sounds like a joke, but it's the reality. And then it's like, wait, I don't get that. If it's, targeted to college grads or recent college grads, but they're saying 2 to 5 years. I mean, should young people ignore that and just send their resumes anyway? Or is it because these companies really aren't thinking it through and they're just putting out the job descriptions and not really giving it much thought? What do you think?
Well, Jack, I could certainly talk about that. I know Cassie does too. Look, hey, she's chomping at the bit. But so my thought on that, and I was going to sort of piggyback a little bit off kind of what she was saying too. I think it's kind of like a twofold kind of a thing. On the one hand, from the career services side, when we're working with students, we're always promoting starting out your internships, honestly, freshman year, sophomore year, if you can, to start building those experiential learning opportunities, to start like really, really bolstering up that resume.
I don't mean to interrupt you, Brad.
Oh, sure.
But do you mean so that if you have that on there, you could put, when they say like 1-2 years experience, and you have like a strong internship, you could count that as the experience?
Certainly, if it's correlated to the position,
right.
Applying for.
I didn't even think of that term. So to be fair, then with those job descriptions of time, if they say 2-3 years experience, and let's say you do have, a year or two, you're well within your right to, as a young person graduating, to position yourself that yes, I do have it.
Certainly, and one of the things that I would say in addition to that is that if I'm working with a student who is applying for a job and they're running into that, naturally they're gonna have that response of, well, maybe I don't have 2 to 3 years experience, and what do I do? And so again, I kind of get them to sort of think about it, creatively in terms of like, what do you have? And that, sort of remembering these kind of things are sometimes wish lists, and we try to make sure that you're communicating your value the best way that you possibly can. And so you're not going to hit 100% every time. And so what is the value that they're trying to communicate in terms of the experience? How do those things equate? And so do you feel like you still stack up if you're not talking about like you have a specific job experience? So.
Yeah, Cassie?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I'm sometimes a little bit more blunt with students of just telling them to ignore the years if it's 1 to 3 or 2 to 4, because I wish I had an answer. Maybe you guys
Does it
can
work
have.
that way? Does it
What?
work when they do? Does it work when they do that?
You know, I mean, I think sometimes they're like, really? Like someone's giving me permission to ignore that? And my answer is yes. Like, ignore it, because
Yeah.
I wish I knew why an entry-level job says, 1 to 3 or 2 to 4, because it doesn't really
your
make
experience,
sense.
So your experience, like if they take your advice and they say, you know what, I'm going to ignore and do it, you notice, you get feedback from your students saying, hey, I got the interview, I got, maybe the job.
Well, yeah, I mean, yes, like anecdotally, but I mean, when you think about it, like I work with students who they're scrolling through these job boards, which is already, a sometimes rough way to be job searching. And they're limiting themselves so much, because how often have you ever seen a job that says 0 years of experience required, or even 1? It's like, I think maybe I've seen 4 or 5 postings in like years that say 0 on it. So they're limiting themselves so much by saying like, oh, I can never apply to anything that wants 2 to 4 years of experience. So just by kind of giving them that permission, we're already opening a huge door of like, yes, you can apply to that. But then there is a little bit more to the conversation around like a job description does tend to be a wish list, and kind of recognizing that for everyone, whether you're a student or a young professional, like you don't have to, and you probably shouldn't check the box on everything they're looking for, because we're often looking to advance our careers, right? We're not trying to make like super lateral moves. So it's going to be rare if you're applying to a higher position that you've done everything in the exact way that they're looking for. So kind of reiterating that to students, because they don't always make that connection that this is a wish list. And then really getting them to focus on like, what are the top skills or experiences that this job is looking for? And like Brad said, does your experience match up with that? And then also getting them to think about like the things that you don't have that's on that job description. Do you want to do it? Because if it's learning a new program or software or something like that, and you're not interested in doing that, well, then we probably need to reevaluate it. But if you're eager to learn something new, if that's a skill set you've learned other softwares but that are similar or something like that, we can use that, right? We can show an employer that you have the capability to learn something quickly and that type of thing. And you can apply that skill set or that ability to whatever you don't necessarily have that direct experience with.
Yeah, and I think that really, if we look at the behavior, I think what I'm getting is overall picture that it is, people have spent the last 15 months, if they've been working already, that they've been able to really think about their careers, and they had time to mull it over and have made decisions. Okay, the first opportunity, I'm walking in spite of. And in the best situation, they saved the money and they got a feel for what was really going on in the market. So they decided to walk. I think is also an excellent situation where if the student can work this next year as an intern to kind of watch to see what companies are really going to do. And maybe it's good to even work at that company that they are not planning to stay at, just so that they can watch and see what the behavior is going to be with the companies that are going to be working or not, a hybrid model, or to see what they're going to be doing. So the internship really is just laying in the cut, so to speak, this year. Is that you're going to have all these kinds of things going on, and you just want to make the right move for you when it comes to next year, when there's more of a steady hand as to who's doing what this coming year. Jack?
It's so interesting, Mark. So that as I was asking Brad and Cassie about, okay, can what do you do about that? They're asking for years experience. But meanwhile, when I look at, job descriptions for mid to senior executives, and they have all these, bullet points, I immediately disregard it. I'm thinking to people, don't worry about this. Don't worry about that. But meanwhile, when it came to the starting college, my first thing is, oh, do you really need it? And I don't know why my mind thinks that. Like, why, as Mark was talking, I'm thinking about, that's like,
because it's a rite of passage.
It's a ridiculous wish list. It's ridiculous.
It's a rite of passage.
The same thing for college kids, right?
Yeah, you're being hazed the first few years of your working professional life. You really are, because you're asked I mean, I don't know how many people gone to. I've seen a lot of in the past. The 21-year-old is asked to have 5 years of experience. That means they want you to work since 16, which isn't
It's
particularly.
crazy. Look, it's even senior people, same thing. It's nuts.
And secondly, the job description, people get all wrapped up about a very vague, and mostly badly written job description. It's kind of like, how can you put a finger on something when it's vague, but really in this sentence next to last, they really want you to have this very specific experience. Uh,
Hmm.
and that's what they're putting most of the weight on. Who's going to know unless you have you have a bottle that you can see through, or a magic ball or something. I mean, nobody can really translate these things very often.
Hmm.
So it's a very disheartening for some, but I think a lot of them who've taken an internship for the 10, 11 months, good job. You're
Hmm.
watching, you're being vigilant, and you're watching to see what is my favorite company going to do, or what is my industry. And when you're young, you also have a chance to change your mind
Right.
and maybe even take another internship for the next year to see. I mean, it all depends on what, how things are aligned with your values. And probably this is one of the few shows where we hadn't had anybody in the chat say anything. They're just watching us talk, which I think is
Yeah.
very
Hey, Mark, do you
fascinating.
mind? I know you like we're hitting at the time, but do you guys have like
Yeah,
2 more minutes?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
go ahead. Let's go. Yeah.
Because one, I was thinking maybe if you guys want to help me out with something, because as I'm listening to you talk, I think maybe you could help with an article about kind of how to navigate, all the things we're talking about for young people. If you see, 2 to 5 years, you don't have you ignore it. Maybe going for an internship. So that kind of advice where I think a lot of young people really don't know what to do. I'm
Hmm.
sure in both of your colleges you give them a lot of advice and guidance, but they're all what I've noticed. A lot of colleges don't, and they're just thrown out there, and they don't know what to do. And as Mark pointed out, the parents are giving advice from the '80s and '90s that may not resonate. So then the poor kids are like, "What the heck am I supposed to do?" So if you guys don't
Hmm.
mind, maybe Mark, you too, we could kind of, in that chat, just I could kind of flesh it out a little bit more what I'm thinking. But I think that would
Sure.
be really so helpful, both the parents and the kids, because sometimes the parents need to kind of know it. Because if they're giving advice that doesn't really coincide with the new reality, they're doing a disservice to their children. And if the kids aren't sure what to do, they're just, it's frustrating. So,
Hmm.
so that seems interesting. Then the other question I want to ask: what about parents? Do you find where you have like overbearing parents who get involved in this whole thing? And is that like a big taboo? Is that a thing or no?
Do you want to go for?
I mean, like,
I-
I'm tempted to say no comment because I don't want to
So
offend
that's a
anyone.
yes. Okay.
Um, I mean, we
Offend us, please
definitely
offend us.
there are
Hypothetically, not in your school, not in
yeah,
Venus,
right.
right?
Hypothetically,
Yes.
No.
I mean, yeah, parents call
And as
and
we
email.
go, or New Paltz, or one of those other places, Albany.
Right.
Right. Right.
Yeah. SUNY Albany. That's yeah.
Great. Now I'm gonna have them all come
Yes.
after me. Go to no schools in New York, or any. Yeah, parents call, parents email, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I think you see those, like, when people call them like the bulldozer parents, and they're just like literally coming in full force
Yeah.
and that type of thing. And it's challenging because I've had parents, when we were in person, I've had parents show up in our office with their student for like a walk-in appointment, and then you're kind of navigating having a conversation where a parent is sitting directly across from you, and the student is sometimes very interactive, sometimes not. You have parents call and they're asking questions that sometimes I can answer for them, but sometimes I can't, depending on what the question is, and different, rules that we have around that. So I think it's challenging because having parent support and encouraging their students to come to events that their career centers are offering and to take advantage of the resources that so many college campuses have, like more resources than students are even beginning to like scratch the surface on, that can help them grow their network and be strategic and gain new skills and explore their options. Like, there is so much available to them that having a parent who's like, hey, you need to go do these things, can be so great. And I definitely love when parents do that. On the other end of the spectrum,
Not in your school, in other schools.
yeah, not at my school, right? At other schools,
in California. Yeah, not
yeah.
here. Not in New York. Not
You know,
upstate New York.
when a parent is like full force in it and not providing, they're directly contradicting the things that we would say, or really challenging the things that we think are accurate, and that type of thing is definitely hard to navigate, and to balance that out a little bit.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put you in an awkward spot. I was just
No, it's fine. It's fine.
I don't know if this is an urban myth or not. I've heard stories about parents showing up at a person's workplace and like talking to the boss or calling the boss.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've had parents that want to meet with me or my colleagues without their student even knowing, or calling and saying like, like, I want to register my student for this internship class. Like, that is a call I've gotten before. And I'm like, you can't, like, I can't register your student for this class.
Right.
Like, there's a process we have to follow. And do they even have an internship, parents asking for phone numbers of companies and contacts, and it's just information that we can't provide. And I'd like to think it's all well intentioned. It's just like the student does have to learn and navigate that. And I also talk with a lot of students who they don't want to go the route that their parents are encouraging, pressuring them to go. They don't want to go to med school. It's not interesting to them, but that is the expectation. And so I've definitely had a lot of conversations, in the last 5 years or so about that.
Especially if you're immigrant. You have a high expectation, and they don't know what a wiggle room is. It's pretty much, this is the path, this is the way you go. If you want to remain in my good, if you want to remain good with me, that is way.
Or to have their undergrad paid for. I hear that all the time, that my parents are only helping me through school if I become a lawyer or become a doctor or whatever the case.
Wow, so that's a lot of pressure.
Oh, yeah.
That's a lot. And they probably come to your office stressed out. Like, I don't want to be a lawyer or doctor. And oh my God.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Brad, your thoughts?
Yes. 100%, yes, on everything she talked about. I've got stories out the wazoo of parents, and God bless them. They're well intentioned. I love them, but sometimes they can be a bit much. But one of the things that I was kind of coming to my mind, I think it's a Tony Robbins quote when he says that we're drowning in information and starving for wisdom. And I think students come to our offices like that, and they have gotten all of these external messages about what to do with their life from everybody that they've ever met, friends, families, church members, teachers, advisors. Everybody tells them what they should be. And a lot of our work is kind of stripping that all down and kind of saying, really, what do you want? And getting in touch with that authentic self, and so, we spend a lot of time on doing that. And sometimes it's hard because, those voices are just really loud.
All right. One last question, a hypothetical one. So let's say there's a parent of 2 college kids. And
you're not talking about me, Jack. No, I'm minor past college right now.
Yeah, hypothetical. And if this dad happens to have a lot of contacts in different places, is it bad form for this hypothetical dad to call in favors to see, hey, is there an opening, or hey, this opening looks good, what do you think? And try to kind of, do a little nepotism, getting a job thing?
Is it something that they will want?
Oh, so let's assume they want, yes. Yeah, not to force it.
Okay, all right. Just want to be clear here.
Oh, yeah. Is it bad form to kind of try to pull strings and call in favors? And
I don't think so at all. I think it's just a matter of, really trying to sort of understand what their values are and get their buy-in and determine are these opportunities that they'd like to explore. But, I certainly don't have an issue.
Yeah. I mean, I think if a parent is using their network and connecting their student to their network, I mean, we have all probably connected our friends and family members and whoever to someone that we know, right? So I think if they're using their network and facilitating that connection for a student, I'm on board, right? Like have that conversation, learn about that opportunity, have that first opportunity. Great. I think, use your network.
Yeah, I appreciate it, because to be very transparent, one of the reasons I asked too is give you a real candid, situation. So a place that I've placed a couple, people with, a really great company. I respect them. They do great work, really nice. And I noticed on their job board, something for corporate finance, kind of right in the wheelhouse. And I'm like, wait, I should probably talk to that HR person and say, hey, my son would be perfect. But I didn't want to do it because I didn't know if that's kind of creepy or weird, or, is that just, traditional networking?
Yeah, I think it's all in the approach. Yeah.
You can always ask him.
No, he's fine. No, he's fine.
I mean, if he's fine with it, then that's cool. Especially if you have it in, it's almost irresistible that you don't. And then surprisingly, what we learned from the last recession that we had in 2008, 2009, that a lot of parents were like, if you didn't have that, you didn't have anything else. But instead, parents were more like, well, you got to apply and play the numbers game. I'd rather you just pull out your Rolodex and give me some names.
Yes.
Instead of trying to get me to work harder, which isn't really much of an issue when it comes to job search, is working smarter. And if you've got a connection, by all means. And I'll tell you a little funny story. When I was unemployed, not as a college student, but as a little bit older adult, my dad gave me names of people. He didn't give me jobs. And what that said was that, let me talk and not only just, try to make a connection if they know someone, but maybe they can continue to introduce me down the line to someone who does know me. So, is that second and third connection, we may know it from LinkedIn, that the introduction to the introduction to the introduction, that is where the sweet spot is. The longer you go down the line, the better off you'll be able to be. And plus, you can use those other people possibly later. So people hire people is what we always hear. It's a cliche, but it is something that does work and stands the test of time, which is one of the few things that stands the test of time when it comes to hiring. Really, it is. So, Jack, are you done with your inquisition?
Yeah. Hey, we got all the juicy gossip out. We got all the inside
let's get that.
Inside intel.
But you got a great question, and that was one of the things that I did with both of my sons. One son had it; he had a plan, and he's still following that plan. And my other one was trying to figure it out, and but he wanted to do a lot of it by himself, and that's why I had to ask. Is that what your child will want for you to? Would they mind you giving them a little help, being that they know what you do for a living? So I think it's very important. Anyway, we are 15 minutes past the hour.
Thanks for staying late. I appreciate it.
Yes, we do. Yes, Brad Minton, again, he's a resume writer. If you need a resume writer, he's a guy that you could tap on the shoulder, career coach as well. And Brad, you got anything coming up that the people should know about? Anybody's podcast? Are you being quoted in an article? Are you going to be an Oprah? Any of those things?
No, I obviously Your Career GPS. We're recording. We put out episodes every Tuesday. We have some excellent guests coming up. Definitely check out Mark's episode on a past one. I will be recording a future episode upcoming with Mac Pritchard for the Find Your Dream Job podcast, which I'm excited about, speaking about introversion and how to leverage introvert strengths. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, Mac, a good friend of mine. Cassie, anything we should know about?
I'll just reiterate about the podcast. Definitely check out your Career GPS. I think the episode that just dropped yesterday was all about kind of reversing your job search. So really relevant to this conversation and to getting people to think about some different ways to approach job searching there. So a lot of good content to come.
And Jack, you got anything coming up?
You know, the good news is like we keep getting job orders in, which is really nice. You know, it shows that the economy is picking up, you know, and it's exciting. So I'm kind of working on that. We're still tinkering with elevatorpitch.com because I think that's a really great tool that I understand in Binghamton University, they're going to kind of use that to help the students practice their interviews.
You guys are about to get me in some trouble.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
You never know.
No, you can tell them to call. So and I'll tell them, Dean, we're only joking, we're kidding. So
yes, we are kidding. And if
you got to make it light, if you just want serious job talk, it'll bore people. So we got to make it a little fun.
Yep, you can go ahead and contact Jack if you want to know more about that. You can get into his groups and check out his articles, which we'll probably hear more about in the future as far as elevator.com, elevatorpitch.com. Let's see. For me, I hope to have nothing, but I do have the show on Friday. That's coming up, the Modern Job Search Checklist. Check us out, 1 p.m. Eastern on Friday. In the meantime, I'm going to let the rest of us go. Thank you very much for joining us for this extra session, of course. This will be up on the YouTube channel if you want to check that out. You could just look for Job Seeker Nation channel, and you should be able to find it pretty easy. Thank you, Brad and Cassie, for joining us and for staying for those extra few minutes.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure meeting you.
And Jack, of course, thank you as usual. We'll be looking for your writings, of course, as well in Forbes. And me, I've had so much going, I forgot what I had going on. So that's not so important. Thank you very much for joining us. You all have a great week, and thank you again, Brad and Cassie, for joining us.
Thank you both.
Thanks.
Take care. Thank you.